Hey, what's up guys? Random Anime Review here. We have got a 24 episode anime this week, Speed Grapher, about a dark underground world of elites who feel that they've experienced everything a normal life has to offer and feel a need to be satisfied. Congregating in clubs, these elites take part in frowned upon or forbidden acts to fulfill their deepest desires for a hefty membership fee. To become an elite is to bear all the worst parts of yourself that cannot be shown in daylight for others to see, thus validating you in their twisted circle. Now you can't escape. They all know your darkest secrets, and you know theirs. Mutually assured destruction that is out of everyone's best interest. Investigating this private underground club is Saiga, a photographer turned journalist who lives for immortalizing the lowest moments of humanity in history. With that, let's get it. Hit him with the intro. The story begins with us being introduced to Saiga, a war photographer turned journalist who begins investigating rumors of a club reserved for only the upper class of society. Saiga seems to crave more than the mundane life that he currently lives. He wants to find purpose once again. As a war photographer, the thrill, danger, and the eternal connection to history allowed Saiga to feel alive. That is, until his near-death experience forced him to return home. Photography is a part of his soul, and he wants to capture things that no one else can ever capture on his camera. His psycho girlfriend, Ginza, compensates for this lack of excitement in his life. Ginza is an inspector in the police department and deeply in love with Saiga, who does not share the same feeling. Instead, he desires to feel alive and to be one of a kind photographer. Knowingly putting himself in danger, he enters the exclusive club, documenting all he sees until he enters the VIP section and is caught taking a picture of Kagura, a high school girl in a trance-like state dressed divinely for a ceremony. As Saiga is brought up to the center stage to be executed in front of all for breaking the rules, Kagura kisses him, activating a power inside him called Euphoria. Euphoria is a latent virus, activated by the serotonin-infused bodily fluid of Kagura. The power that Saiga gains is the power to destroy everything he takes a picture of. Using this power, he tries to escape with Kagura, but is followed by her manipulator, Suitengu. Suitengu is the main antagonist who rose to power by auctioning the power of Kagura to activate Euphoria to the upper class and people in positions of power. Adopting a fight fire with fire motto, he becomes the centerpiece of corruption so he can destroy it. The same corruption that destroyed his life will now fall due to his power. In order to achieve his goal, however, he needs to have legitimate status in the business world. Kagura is the key he needs, and thus he hunts her and Saiga down to accomplish his dream. Through their fugitive journey, Saiga and Kagura are met with others who have the power of Euphoria. Fights are initially interesting as Saiga becomes more and more creative with the way he uses his powers. It does start to get a little bit old as it becomes a villain of the week kind of scenario and formula. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it kind of reminded me of Stan's and JoJo's. Not nearly on the same level, but interesting nonetheless. A lot of scenes also did not require the removal of clothes, but it did speak volumes about the difference between the underground elites and regular people regarding typical social protocols. Typical expectations meant nothing as they have no one they need to impress. Wanting to have schmecks was also somehow an emotion. The amount of implied and sometimes very, very explicit schmeck scenes become almost laughable. They would become completely laughable if this show understood how consent was obtained, but that's a completely different topic for another video. Crazy enough, this show might have been progressive for its time in 2005 for frankly poorly exploring sexuality outside the typical male view, but was a door opened nonetheless. Women are in positions of power and technically control men. It's too bad that 90% of females in the show have the libido of a male lion in heat. Men are portrayed as predators at every chance they can, with older rich men splashing the cash on workers to fulfill any and all their needs. Screen time for the stuff was ridiculously high, and rarely had anything to do with the story itself, becoming pointless filler. Maybe if they had taken all those scenes out, it might have actually been a 12-episode show. I am exaggerating, but honestly not by much. I kind of had a love-hate relationship with the pretty funny lengths they went to be scientifically accurate, since they failed at the simplest concepts, such as two falling objects, regardless of their mass, will accelerate at a constant rate until terminal velocity is reached. What they do get right are latent viruses, which they don't actually explain well, but term the virus in the genome of the characters as a retrovirus. You might be thinking, why is this an interesting factoid? Well, it's because a retrovirus that is also transmitted through bodily fluids is HIV, so this is a cool little parallel, if you will, that is kind of accurate. Other instances of attempts to seem accurate lack enough information for someone who doesn't know things like the Hayflick limit, the makeup of DNA, or how a virus functions, only explaining an effect without a cause. Now, I am not going to get all nerdy, but some concepts of the anime are plausible. The latent virus in the host's genes can be activated by serotonin should a pathway be present, however unlikely, but the narrative does not explain it completely, and frankly doesn't do a good job of explaining it at all, but it is possible technically. Now that we've gone over some semantics, plausibility, and validity of the concepts provided in the show, let's get into some of the topics covered. Materialism versus experience was an early theme which I thought could have been developed further. Symbols of love or friendship are not greater than love itself. Wedding rings are merely a token of love one holds for their partner and not a proportional representation of how much they care. I would go as far to say that love is not something that can be accurately quantified, as simply making a grand gesture for someone can have an ulterior motive rather than genuine feelings. One of the villains falls into this trap of thinking that the diamonds her lover gives her are a representation of the love in their relationship. She believes their love is limitless and thus feels that her husband must buy her all the diamonds in the world to validate the relationship, which drives him to his death. She ironically continues her obsession with the very thing that caused the death of her husband to honor his memory and love, which she continued to fail to understand until the end. A thoughtful idea that was also presented is, what do you do if you have everything the world has to offer? There are no new experiences left for you to partake in. We know that at that point, extra money doesn't really provide much happiness, as you are already at the peak of quality of life. In the real world, we often see the uber rich become fascinated with collecting items of value such as wine, artworks, or literature. They found something interesting to give them a reason to continue making money and give them short-term joy. But these things can also become mundane. This is the pitfall of the elites in Speedgrapher, who are fascinated with the taboo and completely freed their desires. Enabled by a black market and executives in the police force, these individuals abuse other humans without consequence for their own enjoyment. Money becomes worthless to them. Take Suitengu, for example, who smokes cigarettes rolled with money bills. Is there really any reason for someone to be that rich? This brings up another question and topic of the anime. Is that true freedom for all? The short answer is no. Once the freedom of someone infringes on the freedom of someone else, it is not freedom for all. The freedom of others to achieve their dreams is limited by groups who hold their money within their inner circle, thus never letting it circulate to the general population. Kagura symbolically portrays this as she is used without compensation or even basic human rights. She is in a cage she cannot escape, limited by the power of those around her, no different than workers in impoverished countries making cents per day as corporations profit massively off their cheap, unfairly extorted labor. For these unlucky people, they have no way out unless the system itself changes, since they are easily replaceable, unlike Kagura, who is one of a kind. So, how do you topple someone who has virtually unlimited resources and has created an environment that limits you? Almost everything you can buy will benefit them either directly through their companies or through their stocks in other companies. There are two possible solutions to fix the system or to destroy it. Fixing the system would be a near impossible process since the scale in Speedgrapher is so great. I am saying that I actually agree with the villain in that the corruption is not something that is fixable when it reaches such a scale. Getting rid of the system that enables the crooked network completely and allowing a new system to develop, combining it with actively stopping any attempts to corrupt it once again, is a much more feasible task. The enemies are much smaller and do not have the same resources, which then you can overcome. Much like a forest fire allows everything a fair chance to grow again, destroying the system allows everyone to restart. I do want to clarify that I do agree with Sweet Tengu on this small point. I think he's still a terrible person, and really no one should look up to this guy. I mean, he did some terrible things. Yeah, this is about the only good idea he's ever had. Moving on to soundtrack and animation, they were both minimal passes. Animation was highly variable between decent and horrible. They often reused the same exact scenes even within the same episode, and occasionally had loops of movement to clearly work within their small budget. Complemented by an often too loud, repetitive soundtrack that sometimes muffled dialogue, the overall production felt sloppy. The entire mood of the anime was somber, with constant sadness emanating from the soundtrack. There was no happy music in the show, making it feel like nothing was accomplished, and maybe that was the intent, but I doubt it. Evidence in the conclusion suggests more strongly that the country was destroyed completely and allowed to develop without the corruption that plagued its upper class. It is hard to actually say though, because the writing is all over the place to the point where it's hard to come to real breakthroughs about the message since everything was underdeveloped. Furthermore, it was an uneasy watch between the constant replaying of a progressively annoying soundtrack and the abhorrent depictions of men abusing their power. While it may be an exaggeration meant to prove a point, it was excessive and time-wasting. Symbolism was a strong point in the show, especially in its conclusion. To watch this anime, you kinda have to be in a mood. I don't really know what exactly that mood is for you, but for me it's one where you feel caged in and are having trouble finding purpose. It could also be being stopped from doing what you love and craving to return. I tried to find the optimal mood to watch the show because I thought it would resonate within me better. There is still a lot left on the table with this anime, with such underdeveloped themes and lazy animation. To me, it is a strong 4 to a light 5. That marks the end of another random anime review. If you have watched Speedgrapher and want to talk with me about it in the comments, about how you interpret it, let me know in the comments. I will be obviously looking to talk to you guys. Thanks for watching. This is Random Anime Reviewer signing off. Zoop!